Ignite your curiosity with Austin Next. We're watching Austin transform from a thriving ecosystem into a global superstar. With our host, Jason Scharf, we aspire to better comprehend the true nature of innovation. Together, we will uncover what makes a successful ecosystem and navigate the technologies shaping our future. Now let's dive into what's next.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Austin Private Wealth, a registered investment advisor focused on fee-only financial planning and investment management. Their mission is to serve affluent clients with personalized financial advice, fostering a trusted relationship that will endure for generations to come. Austin Private Wealth is not just about managing wealth. They're about inspiring you to embrace a future filled with possibilities and helping you architect enduring legacies. Their core values of integrity, service, caring, excellence, and growth are at the heart of everything they do. Connect with them today at austinprivatewealth.com.
Austin Private Wealth is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Austin Private Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Austin Private Wealth unless a client service agreement is in place. Investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional.
Jason, I guess we could have called this episode It's Not Your Father's Space Race Anymore. And while Texas has been a critical component in our reach for space, it has never been more central than today. Beyond the names that everyone knows, SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA's Johnson Center in Houston, there is so much more going on here. A recent Austin Inno article put it this way: they're fueled in part by record-setting levels of venture capital investment in space tech. Venture funding for space tech has grown from $2 billion in 2017 to $6 billion last year, according to Crunchbase data. About two-thirds of that coming from venture capitalists. And in this year, investors have made over $2 billion in deals. But it's not just about rockets and other hardware. Space is the venue for the latest in software, decision-making systems that allow us to translate what we learn there to ideas we can use here on the ground. And that leads us to our guest today. In 2017, Melanie Stricklan took everything she had learned in 21 years of service with the United States Air Force to co-found Slingshot Aerospace, a company that is empowering organizations with its decision intelligence technologies. Today, she's the company's chief executive officer, where she leads the strategic vision, product development, and the company's growth strategy. Melanie had a distinguished Air Force career, whether it was ground surveillance aircraft, experimental spacecraft missions, or leading the development of space control technologies for the Department of Defense. A trailblazer in the industry, Stricklan frequently speaks at conferences about the value of situational awareness and advancing space sustainability. I also hosted a TED Talk discussing how images from space protect the Earth. Also joining us is Mike Ciannilli of NASA. Mike is the agency's director of the Apollo, Challenger, and Columbia Lessons Learned program. He assumed this role in 2016 and is responsible for innovatively and effectively sharing the lessons of the past to help ensure future success. This unique role involves leading lessons learned discussions for NASA employees at all levels. He uses the stories of Apollo 1, Challenger, and Columbia to share what has been learned from these past mishaps to prevent reoccurrence in future applications. Ciannilli also does large-scale lessons learned events at Kennedy Space Center, where he works to bring these past experiences and the emotions behind the accidents alive through multimedia and strong storytelling. These events expand across the agency, and in addition to these main activities, he also collaborates with outside media like National Geographic to share these lessons learned with a wider audience. Mike joined NASA in 2005. Coming from the United Space Alliance, where he was a project test engineer. He grew up in Syracuse, New York, and he enjoys spending time with his family as well as a myriad of outdoor activities.
Melanie, Mike, welcome to the Austin Next podcast.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
So before we get started, Melanie, I want to first thank you for your service and talk to me about how the Air Force experience translates into Slingshot.
Yeah, so as you know, I spent 21 years in the Air Force. I retired in 2017 and started Slingshot There's several things that I brought with me to Slingshot from the Air Force and translate very clearly. One is leadership. So I feel like the Air Force, both on the enlisted side, I started out enlisted flying in the back of a surveillance aircraft and moved over to space as an officer. But throughout my career, they cultivated leadership. They gave me a tool bag of leadership capability that I bring to work every single day here with our team and cultivate our team. Another thing is just the importance of culture. Although the culture was pretty set whenever I joined the Air Force, unlike Slingshot, I was able to understand the differences of very quickly understand, okay, if you don't set the culture early, the culture will set itself. And it made me think, when the Air Force first started and now the Space Force first starting, my goodness, the load that those leaders had to take on to set that culture early and cultivate it often. And so those are two things that I bring over from a leadership perspective. But then the technical inclination that's needed to execute something as robust as what Slingshot's doing takes just a unique and diverse set of skill set across data science and AI and front end and back end and full stack engineering and simulation and 3D and it just goes on and on and on. And so being able to bring together a cross section of America's brightest and best into one company and get them to execute towards a big vision is something that I also learned in the Air Force and brought with me over here to Slingshot.
No, and I think the space industry seems to be this real interesting amalgamation of both kind of the, building physical objects, while obviously the data and software side become really critical going forward as well. So talk to me a little about Slingshot. What is it that the company does? Who are your primary customers?
Yeah, our mission is really to accelerate space sustainability and elevate our customers who are typically owner-operators of satellites and launch vehicles. We want to give them the ability to monitor, simulate, and truly optimize their space operations, their space systems, as they fly through a very, very dynamic environment. So we bring a dynamic virtual environment to them to help with their decision intelligence.
It is interesting that we think about the infrastructure stack of companies now, and you start having almost, as I understand, right, the Slingshot's kind of the back end of, you hear about the satellites, you hear about the rockets and all those kind of things, but it takes a lot more behind the scenes as well to kind of really grow the space industry as we're seeing, and I just find that fascinating. Obviously, we're talking about Austin here and the innovation ecosystem. Can you describe, in your words, kind of the space industry, the history here in Austin, and how long has it been, and how did it really get started, and what do you see is kind of impacting us today?
Yeah, so I think our entire world is experiencing a convergence of industries. And for Slingshot specifically, it's the confluence of high power compute, AI, and next generation immersion and simulation, and being able to bring real time data of the entire space domain from debris to where the objects are precisely from a positional knowledge perspective and where they're going to be, and be able to plan and what if analysis, that kind of thing. So that confluence of technology is something that Austin, Texas has had and continues to cultivate on a very progressive basis. And I think that, the space economy has benefited from that confluence, but is now bringing confluence of those technologies to space. And so the history of space technology in Texas has been robust. It's starting to become more robust in Austin specifically. Back in the Apollo days, there were component manufacturers in Austin, as well as chipset manufacturers. And today, the emerging space industry there is bringing the likes of, I heard SpaceX may be coming there. Don't have that validated, but some of their Starlink components may be manufactured out in Austin soon. You've got folks like Cesium Astro and Slingshot and Firefly. Small launch is making a huge difference in how we get on orbit today. Anyway, so exciting to see where Firefly goes in the future there. And then Cesium's doing more edge processing and really shortening the latency that we've been so familiar with in the space industry for so long. So that's an exciting opportunity for them as well. And I'm sure there's others that I don't know of. For the large primes, they all have kind of a little footprint there in Austin, and I expect that to grow tremendously as we approach that $4 trillion space market by 2030.
So you talked about how, space is really taking the convergence of all of these technology, or at least space industry is taking the convergence of these technologies into space. And one of the things that I find really interesting and why when we're doing these kind of individual deep dives on all the different industries in Austin, how do you see space interacting with all of the other kind of innovation sectors in Austin? Is it kind of standalone, or do you see it really kind of either bleeding across or bringing interesting technologies or business models to others as well?
I love the idea of bringing new business models to space, because for years it's been very R&D centric, time and materials, et cetera. And now, although the vast majority of space investment today is still in hardware, rockets, satellites, components, ground stations, the new digital infrastructure that's necessary, like what we're bringing to bear and others, is that digital environment of what those pieces of hardware experience and optimizing spaceflight and other things. And so in order to do that, you've got to have a huge confluence of technologies, but you also have to bring forth more software as a service, I believe, to make this workforce that is necessary to get to that larger market is robust. There's not enough astro and aeronautics schools out there to support that. And so in order to cultivate that workforce, we've got to do things different. We've got to make space accessible to everyone. That is starting to happen, but we also have to make it understandable for everyone. To do that, you've got to bring technology that obviates but continues to keep the fidelity of the physics under the hood, but obviates the complexity so that workforce can be more of a cross-section of the U.S. as it is today. Not everyone's an astrodynamicist, right? And so I think that, the SAS movement that we saw come out of Austin and the Valley over the last 10 or 15 years is significantly going to help the space industry get there and train the workforces necessary with that type of business model and software as a service. And so we're excited to be at the forefront of that, right, along some of the best folks who have learned that coming out of Austin.
I think, you have kind of like the low code, no code movement to really bring programming to all different applications. I like the idea of kind of pulling that over to be like, the low astrophysics, type of product for somebody who doesn't have that kind of degree can really come in and be able to help with that. So where would you think that the maturity level of the industry is? Obviously, we, seeing lots of kind of, the billionaire space race kind of situation going on. And, as we're recording this, we just had, William Shatner go up in Blue Origin. But so that's obviously not sustainable. It's kind of a very kind of still the one-off in testing the products. But where do you kind of see the maturity of both the private space industry and then specifically the Austin space industry?
Yeah, as far as the commercial space industry, a few years back, it was mainly government and nation states. And what we've seen is that script has flipped, and now we have more commercial assets in our orbits than government assets, right? And so I think the maturity of commercial is well on its way to go beyond tourism, right? I think tourism is a wonderful thing because it brings the overview effect and helps people understand that we're all on one planet, we're one unit here. But I think that that's an R&D path to getting more and more capability up, which actually helps humanity in the long run. I think the majority of space industry in Austin is emerging. I think, over the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a solid movement of folks from other states coming in with the incentives that Texas has to bear, and with the rich history of software there as we move into more of a digital space revolution.
So we talked about, you were saying like it was very nation state and government driven, and obviously the initial space race, right? All of the money was coming from, nation states and the like. Now we have lots of private money kind of flowing in. How has that kind of changed the dynamic? Obviously, the customer base, both from an investor perspective and the actual customers, has changed. How is that kind of changing, how Slingshot or any of these companies, go forward?
I think it opens the playing field for new innovators and creators to come to the surface. I think there's an enormous amount of investment in the space revolution right now, which means those space enthusiasts that grew up like me, just loving the night sky and wanting to be astronauts or just wanting to be in the space program, that may not have those degrees or on that skill path, now with the investment going into companies and software becoming more central to this, it allows for those enthusiasts to come work at space companies. So really, I think that's one benefit that we are seeing right now is a influx of dollars, but also an influx of talent that we haven't seen before that brings new creative and innovative technologies to bear. It's an exciting place and time to be right now.
So we've lots of money coming in, lots of new opportunities coming. What are the biggest challenges that you're facing? And specifically, one general challenge is specific things here in Austin. And how is that different than kind of your primary location in California?
There's challenges in both places. El Segundo, California, has been the epicenter of space from the very beginning. We're surrounded by large primes that have been in this industry from the beginning as well. The Northrops, the Boeings, the Lockheeds, the Space Force headquarters for acquisition and R&D for space is there. And it's all just kind of centrally located right there in El Segundo. That makes things easier from let me step over and understand your pain points better from an industry perspective and an end user perspective as far as the government is concerned. But it also is, the talent war is really just like in software out in Austin. That talent war is going on. The talent war is going on in aerospace out in LA. So just different challenges. But the challenge of not being a main space hub yet in Austin is just education and helping the community understand that you can be part of a space company. You don't have to be an astrodynamicist or a rocket scientist to be part of a very progressive, forward-moving industry. And getting out and these types of podcasts definitely help with that. So appreciate the opportunity to be here. But I think the biggest challenge in Austin right now is just the talent war on the software side. So high-tech, extremely educated workforce out there offers, the opportunity to bring those folks in, and the whole nation knows that now. So now Austinites can be hired up in Seattle or out in DC or out in, the Valley and still work from Austin. So it's a heated market for that rich talent force that we've got there.
And it's funny, like across the board, I think talent is one of the biggest issues and challenges that we're seeing, both from we have so much growth opportunities that, it's moving faster than the people that are either switching over or coming here. How are you seeing kind of from the entry level, right? Like obviously top coders, as you said, can go to Seattle or the Bay Area and you kind of pull them over, but are you trying to work on kind of bringing in that whole next generation of to really be the top coders of tomorrow or the engineers or whatever the roles needed is?
Yeah, especially on the astrodynamics side. So, by the time a typical astrodynamicist graduates, then they have already got, 5 or 6 or 7 years of experience under their belt, having worked in the industry. And so it's very obvious to us that we've got to start earlier and earlier from the entry point to UT or the entry point to, these universities. We need to be cultivating our education program because, they're aimed to get into industry. Some of them are aimed to get into startups like us. A lot of them want to go work at NASA and get the Mars stink on them a little bit. So, or the moon stink. And so we've got to, be right there working side by side with the universities on understanding what the talent wants and how to attract that talent in a new and compelling way.
Melanie, thank you. That's a great segue into Michael. Everybody knows who NASA was and how it's been the key government agency responsible for the U.S. push into space. With more and more private space ventures, Mike, what's NASA's role today?
Great question, Michael, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. You made a great segue because Melanie did a great job explaining today's environment, and things are evolving so quickly. So we had many decades since the late 50s of NASA being the primary launch provider and focal point for the nation and even the world in many ways to put us into space, right, in the research space. And that's evolving very quickly, very recently. So the last few years, I think the private space world and the government space world have been kind of finding their way, right? This new world we're living in. and it's evolving rapidly. And what we see was as these new ventures were coming onto the scene, they were kind of getting to know, say, us in the government sector, and kind of understanding us. And then we were also understanding the new kids on the block, if you will, right? The new folks coming in. And I think it was a really interesting time because, they brought maybe perhaps a different approaches in some ways. We had our approach. And what I've been seeing happening is something really, really amazing is as we get to know them and they get to know us, if you will, there's been a lot of great collaboration building. And as far as the NASA side of it, we see this exciting opportunity coming forward with a lot of new talent, young talent, perhaps innovative ways of thinking, different approaches. And so we think if we take that, right, this new energy, this new talent, a way of thinking and approaching operations, design, and all kinds of different aspects, and we match that and marry that with over 60 years of amazing NASA experience and history, and kind of put those two together, we've got something really beautiful. We've got a lot of talent, we got a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom. So our role now is kind of working with them, getting to know what they're thinking. NASA's learning, NASA's growing, and hopefully we're also helping them grow through NASA's history. So it's really an exciting time.
I guess I just want to follow up on one of the statements that Melanie made about a lot of folks in the astrodynamics world going to NASA first to get what did you call it? The Mars stink or the moon stink on them. Does NASA see itself today as you continue this transition into as much a talent provider as a launch source and technology play?
That's a great question. I think we see, and of course it's evolving, right? So I think what we see is we have that rich history, right? We've had, millions and millions of hours of experience of, testing, R&D, launch operations. There's a lot of that inherent wisdom that's been building up over well over half a century now. So I think, NASA sees its role in many ways, but we're really endeavoring to foster the growth of these industries. When we see these new providers coming in, these new companies coming in, it's very exciting because it promotes and furthers the cause of space exploration and space endeavors for the nation, right? And even our international partners. So a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So we're really excited about that. We want to foster that. At our different centers, we do that. So specifically, say, for example, the Kennedy Space Center, that's more of our launch complex areas. And so we have a lot of companies coming in, a lot of organizations. Some have a decent amount of experience, right? They've got a track record, say like SpaceX and those that have some runtime. And then we have new providers that are just coming off the starting line, and they've got perhaps a little farther path ahead of them. But it's exciting. So we can help grow them and try to encourage them to do that. So in some ways, it might be talent related. In other ways, it might just be our help of explaining how things work. There's a rich history of things that have gone right. There's also a rich history of things that didn't happen right. And if you can apply that wisdom, that in all that experience to these folks that haven't had the runtime, the 60 years of runtime, it helps them get off the starting line even quicker.
Yeah, you and I had a chance to talk a little earlier, and I was fascinated by NASA's willingness to talk as much about the easy things, the successes, as well as the hard stuff, the failures. And, it's just been 6 weeks, 7 weeks at the recording time since Firefly attempted their first launch. And I don't think anybody was surprised that they had difficulty the first time. And you know what? It's okay. They are building their experience. And I'm sure they're going to do well with the next one and the next one after that. But I want to talk about your work on bringing these learnings back to Earth. Now, when I was a kid and I wanted to be an astronaut, the main thing we talked about as coming back from the Mercury and the Gemini program was Tang. Tells you how old I am. But now NASA's got so much more experience, and there's so much that you're willing to put on the line. Talk about that work a little bit and how it's impacting NASA, other providers in the aerospace industry, as well as other companies.
It's one of the things I'm unbelievably excited about. And the agency has really embraced teaching our past. When I look at it, right, you look back at history as your guide and your roadmap for the future, right? There's so many folks and so many generations and centuries and millennia that have come before us, and there's a lot of wisdom built up, right? And a lot of that is, things we do that we've learned that are great things to repeat, to emulate, and there's other things we've learned that maybe these aren't the best things to do once again. And if you lose that, you can make those same mistakes. And history is replete with that, right? So it doesn't matter if you're going back and looking at Titanic or further back, any incidences, you can see modern day comparisons to making those same mistakes. That's part of being human, right? They call that the human DNA factor. We're just prone to sometimes repeat mistakes. So what we've done is we've looked at this dynamic world, and this really grew out of when the space shuttle program was being closed out in 2011. And my whole previous life and career was working space shuttle and launch operations. And then we, as we're gearing towards the future, we started looking at that and saying, okay, we've got a great number of new providers coming on board with new innovative ideas. But again, these folks don't have the runtime, right? They don't have a lot of the inherent wisdom built into their systems because they're newer. It's understandable. NASA was there at one time too, right? So we said, how wonderful would it be if we could share those lessons learned? And specifically, of course, we share the good things. We also share the difficult, and we share the times that we've had missteps. We share those times that we've had failures and we've lost our friends and our colleagues and our heroes because we don't want to do that again. On a personal level, I was part of those launch teams, and when we lost Columbia, and those were very, very personal losses for myself and also thousands of the NASA family. We don't want to do that again. We're dedicated to everything we can not to have that happen, not only for the NASA missions, but also for the private industry as well. So what we do is we take a mantra it's been said by many people over many years, but Winston Churchill said it back in the World War II time frame, is those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we've taken that truly to heart. So we look at our past failures. We're very upfront and honest about those. We realize it's something that's very unique that we're able to do in the agency, and that it's something much more difficult for, say, private industry, who has competitors, who has a bottom line, if you will, to meet, and perhaps shareholders and other things, other forces that are at play. And it might be more difficult for them to share difficult things or talk about failure. And that's where we come in with that very unique role, I believe, and are able to talk about that and to talk about those things and say, hey, here's how we made a misstep. Here's what we could have done better. So they take those lessons learned. So we do that. We go back in the 60s. We talk about missions through there. We talk about Apollo 1, Space Shuttle Challenger lost, Space Shuttle Columbia, Apollo 13. And there's a lot of other missions that folks may not know of that had maybe more challenges than, you saw the ending, everything worked great, right? But there's things that happened during those missions that perhaps didn't work so well. So we're bringing all those to the forefront and sharing those.
Turning towards the future a little bit, NASA's role obviously is continuing to transition. And as the private space industry grows, what do you think is next for NASA?
Wow. Well, we've got a lot of great, exciting things on the docket, right? The last couple of years, a lot of high-profile missions. So we just, recently went to Mars again robotically, and we had our latest rover on Mars. We had the first helicopter Ingenuity on Mars, flying the first powered flight, if you will, on another planet. So NASA's been doing some high-profile missions. This Saturday, scheduled to be the Lucy mission. We're going to be launching a mission to the asteroids that are in the Jupiter system. So we got some exciting scientific discovery missions coming up. We also have the James Webb Space Telescope, a massive successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. It's going to completely, hopefully, revolutionize our view of the universe and the history of the universe and our place in the universe, if you will. So we got some huge profile missions coming up. We also have the Artemis program, which is America's return to the moon. We're really excited about that. We have our rocket, our Space Launch System rocket that we're building towards that endeavor. And in addition to that, Michael, we have all of the connections to the private world, right? So NASA is not just doing things standalone anymore. Back in say in the Apollo days or the space shuttle program, but now we've got the infusion and partnerships of private. So when I mentioned Artemis going back to the moon, well, that's not just a government endeavor. Now that's also the private sector's part of that. So we have the folks that are building and processing, say, the Orion spacecraft that's going to help carry out crews. And most recently, we have the addition of SpaceX into that program. So SpaceX is building a unbelievably massive rocket, the Starship system, which is absolutely incredible. It's designed and built to be the largest, most powerful rocket ever built in history. And Starship is now part of Artemis program to help land astronauts on the moon. So NASA's role is, continue to do the NASA specific functions, but it's also to partner and collaborate with these amazing new endeavors to help us pull off these incredible missions, very high profile missions, but also very audacious missions, right? Going back to the moon, building a base, having folks learn how to live and operate on the moon, and then take that technology and learning and take it to Mars and beyond. So NASA's got a really key role going forward.
This has been great, and I've learned a lot. And one of the things that I just find interesting is, I have 3 small children, and how normal this is becoming. We watched, during that couple of weeks when, you had Virgin Galactic, then SpaceX, then Blue Origin all send people up, and my kids are like, "Oh, we're watching another rocket launch." Like it's becoming just so normal now, and I think that's great. And the idea of that they can, there's a non-zero chance that any of them will go to space, I think is pretty exciting. Love where this is all going, and so I thank you guys for your time on being here, and want to definitely think about what's coming. And so we always like to kind of end our interviews with the same kind of central question that we're asking. So Mike, we'll start with you. What's next, Austin?
A lot of exciting things, Jason. There are so many things coming down the pike. When we see, what I see is we reach out with our Apollo, Challenger, Columbia Lessons Learned program, for example, at NASA, right? One of our programs that we teach the lessons. We see so much innovation, so much interest from around the country. Texas is becoming a hotbed for space activity. We saw it yesterday, right? We saw it recently with the second launch of a crew with Blue Origin, right? Astronauts from Texas soil. We see it with Boca Chica and what SpaceX is doing. And we see it with places like Austin and others around Texas and the nation. Everybody thought of space as being centralized, say at the Kennedy Space Center or certain NASA-specific centers. But now the really amazing part is we see it blossoming all over the country, not only with the amazing companies that Melanie spoke of, bringing forth in the military and civilian sectors, but we see that partnering with NASA. So we see companies in Austin helping, partnering. We see amazing talent coming from locations such as Austin, young, bright talent that wants to be a part of the greater mission, right, which is NASA's a part of. So we're excited about that. And again, we see folks reaching out to programs like our Lessons Learned program. What can they learn from NASA? And how can NASA contribute to the success of missions? And it's not just missions of launch operations. We're working with companies and we're working with the sporting industry, right? We're working with the biomedical industry. We're working with transportation. It's exciting how NASA is now partnering with organizations that are far outside of aerospace, but want to learn about safety, want to learn about lessons learned and how it applies to them. So we're excited at NASA that we can partner with all of our friends at Austin and other places like that, and how we can help contribute to their mission success in whatever they're doing, aerospace or not.
Melanie, I'd love to give you the final word. What's next, Austin?
So the space economy sector obviously is growing and fueling, I would say exploding, but that's probably not the best term to use with the space industry. And I just see new opportunities every day. And so with the convergence of technology hubs moving to Austin, I think you see it in the news almost every day. A new company is moving out to Austin. I think Austin is primed to be the next nexus. So maybe it's a nexus in Texas of the space industry. Got all the history around the state also. And as you know, Austin is the center of creativity and innovation. And if that nexus in Texas can be in Austin, I can't think of a better place.
Fantastic. Thank you both for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our pleasure.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.